So today, I just want to hit this real quick. It's in Oswald Chambers, February 6th. And here it is. It says, "Are you ready to be poured out as an offering?" 2 Timothy 4:6 says, "I am already being poured out as a drink offering." Are you ready to be poured out as an offering? It is an act of your will, not your emotions. Tell God you're ready to be offered as a sacrifice for Him. Then accept the consequences as they come without any complaints, in spite of what God might send your way. God sends you through a crisis in private where no other person can help you. From the outside, your life may appear to be the same, but the difference is taking place in your will. You will take no thought of the cost when it begins to affect you externally. If you don't deal with God on the level of your will first, the result will be only to arouse sympathy for yourself. And so, anyways, I just want to encourage us, we need to realize that in order to go forward with God, number one, we have to go through a season that's like a crisis of belief. So there may come a time where God shows you something. He says, this is where you're going to go, and this is what it's going to take to get there. And what it takes to get there is bigger than what you're able to do. And that's the whole point. We're supposed to face things that are bigger than us. If we only have man-sized challenges, then we'll only have man-sized responses. If you're praying for miracles, then you're praying for something different. Because honestly, if you want to see God-sized responses, then you're going to have to face God-sized challenges. So if you're out there and you've ever prayed, hey, God, I want to see miracles. I want to see you do signs and wonders. I want to see you do whatever. Do you realize what you're praying for? You are praying for challenges. There are no miracles without challenges. So if you're saying, God, I want to see you do miracles, you're saying, hey, God, I want to see big challenges so that miracles are required. Then when you see the miracle, you go through a crisis of belief. If you haven't died to your will, to your desires, and even your plans for your life, when you see that crisis, you will not be able to respond with faith and action. So it's right here, right now, we have to decide, God, I'm going to sacrifice Dustin on this altar. All of my will, all of my rights, everything I want, everything I ever could be, it's yours. When I first faced this kind of idea back 20 years ago as a young person, I was in college, and I remember I had to give away soccer because I had torn my quadricep kicking football and playing soccer, and soccer was never an option again, or football. Even though I'd had chances to play in colleges, I had letters of recruitment, there was no way I could play. They would let me walk on, but I'd sit the bench. And even at Carolina, they told me that the best I could do is sit the bench. I couldn't do that. I want to at least be an option to play. I had to literally go through a death process. And it was on a trip in Scotland where I really died to Dustin. I was with my best friend, Thomas Estes, Big T we called him. We're driving through Scotland. I am alone on the bus at that moment. He's talking to some girl, and I was talking to God. And I realized I wasn't going to be able to go on and be able to play soccer and everything else. And I remember being on the bus and seeing how big God was, how big the world was, and that, I was alone in this thing without Him. And I said to Him, you're bigger than all this, God. You can keep me. You can protect me. You can take me through anything. I want to give my entire life to you. Now, I became a Christian at 6 years old. And I had been on fire for Jesus since my high school years. After Tim Mills, my old youth pastor, really confronted me about some stuff in my life, I got really on fire for God. God radically affected me. And I'd stayed on fire. Here I am in the middle of this crisis of belief, realizing how big the world was and that my life was changing. And then in that moment, I realized I'm not going to be a soccer player anymore. I'm not going to be a football player anymore. I'm not going to be known as that. I'm not even going to be known as anything but just Dustin. And this whole world is much bigger than me. I need God to be even bigger in my life. And I prayed on that bus, God, I give you everything I am. I am yours. You want to call me into something? You want me to do ministry? Whatever, it's yours. And I remember saying to Him, God, my body is yours. And I gave Him the hardest thing to give Him, and that was my legs. Because I'd gone through that loss in soccer. I couldn't imagine being without being able to play. And it was like the Lord spoke to me, Dustin, you still rely on your own physical strength. At the end of the day, you rely on your own ability more than me. And I said, God, take my body, take my rights, take my legs. If I never walk again, God bless it, I'll tell your testimony. I'll tell your story. This is before I was called to preach, so I didn't know I'd preach, but I'd say I'd tell your story to the world, even if they have to push me out in a wheelchair to do it. You can have my legs. You can have everything I am. And that was the moment where Dustin started to really die. Now, I'd been a Christian since 6 years old, and I should have matured a lot faster, but it was that point where the maturity kicked it up a notch and things started to really happen. I had to die daily, as Paul said. I had to kill those things which were keeping me away from God's best. I had to not rely on my strengths because my strengths are my greatest weaknesses. And in my weakness, God is made strong. And so at that moment, everything changed. I encourage you, have that crisis of belief. See that moment where God shows you that challenge and stop right there and recognize that you can't do it. And don't run from it. Don't take yourself off the altar and run down the mountain. Lay down that altar and give him all of yourself and say, God, I can't do that without you. I can't do that at all. Take me and use me. And what's going to happen is this, guys. At that very moment, that very point, that's when God can start to do miracles. Because again, it's through the greatest challenges we see that God can do stuff that's God-sized. Are you asking for God-sized movement today? Are you asking for God to do God-sized results? Are you asking for God to do God-sized miracles? Are you asking him to move mountains? Maybe the mountain's you. Maybe it's another. Maybe it's someone else out there. Maybe it's your church or your community. Maybe you're wanting somebody to come to Christ. Maybe you're wanting to see revival. You're praying like I am. God, send revival and affect my entire state in Jesus' name. Set it on fire. Folks, that's outside your ability. That's a God-sized task. Face up to it, recognize it, and pray in. Don't let the crisis make you run. Let it build faith. Chase that faith with all that you are, and you will see God-sized results. Boom.